Alrighty then. Get some music playing here. Yay! Thank you, Mag. Hope everybody's having a good Wednesday. Let's give it a little time to have people filter in before I get started. Tonight we're going to finish the novella by Algernon Blackwood called The Willows. Oh, I'm glad Gwen had a good day. Go, Gwen, go. I hope everybody's doing well. I'm just going to give it a few more minutes for people to filter into the live before we start. Before I start reading. Decided to play a little different music. Usually I just throw on some spooky instrumentals, but I decided to play these tonight because I just think they're cool. So what we're going to be reading tonight is the last half of the novella by Algernon Blackwood called The Willows. We'll be picking up with our two main characters roaming around trying to... Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. So what's the vote? Are we digging the music, or should I go back to our usual? Am I a Scorpio? No, I am a Taurus. Should I be a Scorpio? Or I should ask, what makes you think I might be? No, now you can't leave me hanging like that. What's interesting about it? A Star Wars baby. You know, I'm not sure I would say if I'm a Star Wars baby or not. So I can tell you my earliest childhood memory is actually sitting in the back of my parents' car at a drive-in theater, and in the summer of 1977. And I had a giant bowl of popcorn. The dog was with us, and I remember Darth Vader coming through the smoke when you see him for the first time. That's like burned into my brain. I am drawn to the darker side of things. I am a tiny bit of tiny bit of a horror fan. Tiny meaning it controls my life. We'll go for another minute here before we get started. And I've got a couple things going here tonight, and we'll see if we can finish. How I'm usually on for about 2 hours, so if we can finish The Willows, that makes sense. If we can finish The Willows, I might have another short story to read. So stick around. I'm going to drink all my water before I even start. So dry. I am broadcasting from Western New York, and it is currently 14 degrees. It is currently my mistake. It's 13 degrees out. We've got about anywhere, it depends on where you are, but you got about 18 to 24 inches of snow. It's crazy. I love Halloween. Halloween is my favorite holiday. If I could get away with decorating my house for Halloween and never and just leave it up all year, I would. Because I'm crazy. So where's everybody else? Where's everybody else watching from? 3 degrees in Minnesota. Oof. Yeah. I've got a couple friends in Minnesota, and that's holy crazy. Yeah. Oh, Virginia. Did you guys get it hit with any down there? Arkansas, nice. Doug, I'm glad you're in the house tonight. All right, so let's bring the music down a little bit. Yeah, the ice is the fun part. So last week, we left off. First time experience. Not a fan. Yeah, the cold. That's so cold. When it gets this cold, you go outside and it literally will like hurt your face. And it's kind of like you look and you go, why do I live somewhere where the weather hurts my face? And I know why, because there's no earthquakes, there's no hurricanes, there's no tornadoes, we don't get forest fires. I'm like, eh. I'll take a little ice and snow. I'll take a little ice and snow. And it's really beautiful here in the fall, so it's good. So tonight we're going to be finishing up what we started last week, which is The Willows by Algernon Blackwood. It is a story of two men who are on a canoeing trip down the Danube River. River. Yeah, okay, river. I'm making up words now. River, the Danube River, and they get trapped in this area of the Danube, which is surrounded by willow trees. And they are now at a point where things have happened that it seems like the willows are not going to let them go. So, get started. Sit back and relax. Grab your drink of choice. Bundle up. And enjoy. We sat smoking in comparative silence, the strain growing every minute greater. The worst feature of the situation seemed to me that we did not know what to expect, and could therefore make no sort of preparation by way of defense. We could anticipate nothing. My explanations made in the sunshine, moreover, now came to haunt me with their foolish and wholly unsatisfactory nature. And it was more and more clear to us that some kind of plain talk with my companion was inevitable. Whether I liked it or not, after all, we had to spend the night together and to sleep in the same tent side by side. I saw that I could not get along much longer without the support of his mind, and for that, of course, plain talk was imperative. As long as possible, however, I postponed this little climax and tried to ignore or laugh at the occasional sentences he flung into the emptiness. Some of these sentences, moreover, were confoundingly disquieting to me, coming as they did to corroborate much that I felt myself. Corroboration, too, which made it so much more convincing from a totally different point of view. He composed such curious sentences and hurled them at me in such an inconsequential sort of way, as though his main line of thought was secret to himself. And these fragments were mere bits he found it impossible to digest. He got rid of them by uttering them. Speech relieved him. It was like being sick. There are things about us, I'm sure, that make for disorder, disintegration, destruction, or our destruction, he said once, while the fire blazed between us. We've strayed out of a safe line somewhere. And another time, when the gong sounds had become nearer, ringing much louder than before, and directly over our heads, he said, as though talking to himself, I don't think a gramophone would show any record of that. The sound doesn't come to me by the ears at all. The vibrations reach me in another manner altogether, and seem to be within me, which is precisely how a fourth-dimensional sound might suppose to make itself heard. I purposely made no reply to this, but I sat up a little closer to the fire and peered about me into the darkness. The clouds were massed all over the sky, and no trace of moonlight came through. Very still, too, everything was, so that the river and the frogs had things all their own way. It has to be about it, he went on, which is utterly out of common experience. It is unknown. Only one thing describes it, really. It is a non-human sound. I mean, a sound outside humanity. Having rid myself of this indigestible morsel, he lay quiet for some time. But he had so admirably expressed my own feelings that it was a relief to have the thought out, and to have it confined by the limitation of words from dangerous wandering to and fro in the mind. Forgot to change my visual. Oh no. Just so you know, I am actually broadcasting on both TikTok and on YouTube. So I actually figured out how to get that to work. The solitude of that Danube camping place, can I ever forget it? The feeling of being utterly alone on an empty planet. My thoughts ran incessantly upon cities and the haunts of men. I would have given my soul, as the saying is, for the feel of those Bavarian villages we had passed through by the score. For the normal human commonplaces, peasants drinking beer, tables beneath the trees, hot sunshine, and a ruined castle on the rocks behind the red-roofed church. Even the tourists would have been welcome. Yet what I felt of dread was no ordinary ghostly fear. It was infinitely greater, stranger, and seemed to arise from some dim ancestral sense of terror more profoundly disturbing than anything I had known or dreamed of. We had strayed, as the Swede put it, into some region or some set of conditions where the risks were great, yet unintelligible to us, where the frontiers of some unspoken world lay close about us. It was a spot held by the dwellers in some outer space, a sort of peephole whence they could spy upon the earth, themselves unseen, a point where the veil between had worn a little thin. As the final result of too long a sojourn here, we should be carried over the border and deprived of what we called our lives, yet by mental, not by physical process. In that sense, as he said, we should be the victims of our adventure, a sacrifice. It took us in different fashion. each according to the measure of his sensitiveness and powers of resistance. I translated it vaguely into a personification of the mightily disturbed elements, investing them with the horror of a deliberate and malefic purpose, resentful of our audacious intrusion into their breeding place, whereas my friend threw it into the unoriginal form at first of a trespass on some ancient shrine, some place where the old gods still held sway, where the emotional forces of former worshippers still clung, and the ancestral portion of him yielded to the old pagan spell. At any rate, here was a place unpolluted by men, kept clean by winds from coarsening human influences, a place where spiritual agencies were within reach and aggressive. Never before or since have I been so attacked by indescribable suggestions of a beyond region, of another scheme of life, another revolution not parallel to the human. And in the end, our minds would succumb under the weight of the awful spell, and we should be drawn across the frontier into their world. Small things testified to the amazing influence of the place. And now, in the silence, round the fire, they allowed themselves to be noted by the mind. The very atmosphere had proved itself a magnifying medium to distort every indication. The otter rolling in the current, the hurrying boatmen making signs, the shifting willows, one and all had been robbed of its natural character and revealed in something of its other aspect, as it existed across the border to that other region. And this changed aspect, I felt, was now not merely to me, but to the race. The whole experience whose verge we touched was unknown to humanity at all. It was a new order of experience. And in the true sense of the word unearthly. It's the deliberate, calculating purpose that reduces one's courage to zero, the Swede said suddenly, as if he had been actually following my thoughts. Otherwise, imagination might count for much, but the paddle, the canoe, the lessening food. Haven't I explained all that once? I interrupted viciously. You have, he answered dryly. You have indeed. He made no other remarks, too, as usual, about what he called the plain determination to provide a victim. But having now arranged my thoughts better, I recognized that this was simply the cry of his frightened soul against the knowledge that he was being attacked in a vital part, and that he would be somehow taken or destroyed. The situation called for a courage and calmness of reasoning that neither of us could compass, and I have never before been so clearly conscious of two persons in me. The one that explained everything, and the other that laughed at such foolish explanations, yet was horribly afraid. Meanwhile, in the pitchy night, the fire died down and the woodpile grew small. Neither of us moved to replenish the stock, and the darkness consequently came up very close to our faces. A few feet beyond the circle of firelight, it was inky black. Occasionally, a stray puff of wind set the willows shivering about us, but apart from this, not very welcome sound, a deep and depressing silence reigned, broken only by the gurgling of the river and the humming in the air overhead. We both missed, I think, the shouting company of the winds. At length, at a moment when a stray puff prolonged itself as though the wind were about to rise again, I reached the point, for me, of saturation. The point where it was absolutely necessary to find relief in plain speech, or else to betray myself by some hysterical extravagance that must have been far worse in its effect upon both of us. I kicked the fire into a blaze and turned to my companion abruptly. He looked up with a start. "I can't disguise it any longer," I said. "I don't like this place, and the darkness, and the noises, and the awful feelings I get. There's something here that beats me utterly. I am in a blue funk, and that's the plain truth. If the other shore was different, I swear I'd be inclined to swim for it." The Swede's face turned very white beneath the deep tan of sun and wind. He stared straight at me and answered quietly, but his voice betrayed his huge excitement by its unnatural calmness. For the moment, at any rate, he was the strong man of the two. He was more phlegmatic, for one thing. "It's not a physical condition we can escape from by running away," he replied in the tone of a doctor diagnosing some grave disease. "We must sit tight and wait. There are forces close here that could kill a herd of elephants in a second, as easily as you or I could squash a fly. Our only chance is to keep perfectly still. Our insignificance perhaps may save us." I put a dozen questions into my expression of face, but found no words. It was precisely like listening to an accurate description of a disease whose symptoms had puzzled me. "I mean, that so far, although aware of our disturbing presence, they have not found us, not located us, as the Americans say," he went on. "They're blundering about like men hunting for a leak of gas. The paddle and the canoe and provisions prove that. I think they feel us, but cannot actually see us. We must keep our minds quiet. It's our minds they feel. We must control our thoughts, or it's all up with us." Death, you mean?" I stammered, icy with the horror of his suggestion. "Worse, by far," he said. "Death, according to one's belief, means either annihilation or release from the limitations of the senses. But it involves no change of character. You don't suddenly alter just because the body's gone. But this means a radical alteration, a complete change, a horrible loss of one's self by substitution. Far worse than death, and not even annihilation. We happen to have camped in a spot where their region touches ours, where the veil between has worn thin." Horrors! He was using my very own phrase, my actual words, "so that they are aware of our being in their neighborhood." "But who are aware?" I asked. I forgot the shaking of the willows in the windless calm, the humming overhead, everything except that I was waiting for an answer that I dreaded more than I can possibly explain. He lowered his voice at once to reply, leaning forward a little over the fire, an indefinable change in his face that made me avoid his eyes and look down upon the ground. "All my life," he said, "I have been strangely, vividly conscious of another region, not far removed from our own world in one sense, yet wholly different in kind. Where great things go unceasingly, where immense and terrible personalities hurry by, intent on vast purposes compared to which earthly affairs, the rise and fall of nations, the destinies of empires, the fate of armies and continents are all dust in the balance. Vast purposes, I mean, that deal directly with the soul, and not indirectly with mere expressions of the soul. I suggest just now, I began, seeking to stop him, feeling as though I was face to face with a madman. But he instantly overbore me with his torrent that had to come. "You think," he said, "it is the spirit of the elements, and I thought perhaps it was the old gods, but I tell you now it is neither. These would be comprehensible entities, for they have relations with men, depending upon them for worship or sacrifice, whereas these beings who are now about us have absolutely nothing to do with mankind, and it is mere chance that their space happens just at this spot to touch our own." The mere conception which his words somehow made so convincing, as I listened to them there in the dark stillness of that lonely island, set me shaking a little all over. I found it impossible to control my movements. And what do you propose?" I began again. "A sacrifice. A victim might save us by distracting them until we could get away," he went on. "Just as the wolves stop to devour the dogs and give the sleigh another start. But I see no chance of any other victim now." I stared blankly at him. The gleam in his eye was dreadful. Presently, he continued. "It's the willows, of course. The willows mask the others, but the others are feeling about for us. If we let our minds betray our fear, we're lost utterly." He looked at me with an expression so calm, so determined, so sincere, that I no longer had any doubts as to his sanity. He was as sane as any man ever was. "If we can hold out through the night," he added, "we may get off in the daylight unnoticed, or rather undiscovered." "But you really think a sacrifice would—" That gong-like humming came down very close over our heads as I spoke, but it was my friend's scared face that really stopped my mouth. "Hush!" he whispered, holding up his hand. "Do not mention them more than you can help. Do not refer to them by name. To name them is to reveal. It is the inevitable clue, and our only hope lies in ignoring them, in order that they may ignore us. Even in thought." He was extraordinarily agitated. "Especially in thought. Our thoughts make spirals in their world. We must keep them out of our minds, at all costs, if possible." I raked the fire together to prevent the darkness having everything in its own way. I never longed for the sun as long as I longed for it then in the awful blackness of that summer night. "Were you awake all last night?" he went on suddenly. "I slept badly a little after dawn," I replied evasively, trying to follow his instructions, which I knew instinctively were true. "But the wind, of course, I know. But the wind won't account for all the noises." "Then you heard it too?" "The multiplying countless little footsteps I heard," he said, adding after a moment's hesitation, "and that other sound." "You mean above the tent, and the pressing down upon us of something tremendous, gigantic." He nodded significantly. "It was like the beginning of a sort of inner suffocation," I said. "Partly, yes. It seemed to me that the weight of the atmosphere had been altered, had increased enormously so that we could have been crushed." "And that," I went on, determined to have it all out, pointing upwards where the gong-like note hummed ceaselessly, rising and falling like wind. "What do you make of that?" "It's their sound," he whispered gravely. "It's the sound of their world, the humming in their region. The division here is so thin that it leaks through somehow. But if you listen carefully, you'll find it's not above so much as around us. It's in the willows. It's the willows themselves humming, because here the willows have been made symbols of the forces that are against us." I could not follow exactly what he meant by this, yet the thought and idea in my mind were beyond question the thought and idea in his. I realized what he realized, only with less power of analysis than his. It was on the tip of my tongue to tell him at last about my hallucination of the ascending figures and the moving bushes, when he suddenly thrust his face again close into mine across the firelight, and began to speak in a very earnest whisper. He amazed me by his calmness and pluck, his apparent control of the situation. This man I had for years deemed unimaginative, stolid. "Now listen," he said. "The only thing for us to do is go on as though nothing had happened. Follow our usual habits, go to bed, and so forth. Pretend we feel nothing and notice nothing. It is a question wholly of the mind, and the less we think about them, the better our chance of escape. Above all, don't think, for what you think happens." "All right," I managed to reply, simply breathless with his words and the strangeness of it all. "All right. I'll try. But tell me one more thing first. Tell me what you make of those hollows in the ground all about us, those sand funnels." "No!" he cried, forgetting to whisper in his excitement. "I dare not, simply dare not, to put thought into words. If you have not guessed, I am glad. Don't try to. They have put it into my mind. Try your hardest to prevent their putting it into yours." He sank his voice again to a whisper before he finished, and I did not press him to explain. There was already just about as much horror in me as I could hold. The conversation came to an end, and we smoked our pipes busily in silence. Then something happened. Something unimportant, apparently, as the way is when the nerves are in a very great state of tension, and this small thing for a brief space gave me an entirely different point of view. I chanced to look down at my sand shoe, the sort we used for the canoe, and something to do with the hole at the toe suddenly recalled to me the London shop where I had bought them. The difficulty the man had in fitting me, and other details of the uninteresting but practical operation. At once, in its train, followed a wholesome view of the modern skeptical world I was accustomed to move in at home. I thought of roast beef and ale, motor cars, policemen, brass bands, and a dozen other things that proclaimed the soul of ordinariness or utility. The effect was immediate and astonishingly even to myself. Psychologically, I suppose, it was simply a sudden and violent reaction after the strain of living in an atmosphere of things that to the normal consciousness must seem impossible and incredible. But whatever the case, it momentarily lifted the spell from my heart and left me for the short space of a minute feeling free and utterly unafraid. I looked up at my friend opposite. "You damned old pagan!" I cried, laughing loud in his face. "You imaginative idiot! You superstitious idolater! You—" I stopped in the middle, seized anew by the old horror. I tried to smother the sound of my voice as something sacrilegious. The Swede, of course, heard it too, the strange cry overhead in the darkness, and that sudden drop in the air as though something had come nearer. He had turned ashen white under the tan. He stood bolt upright in front of the fire, stiff as a rod, staring at me. "After that," he said in a sort of helpless, frantic way, "we must go. We cannot stay now. We must strike camp this very instant and go down the river." He was talking, I saw quite wildly, his words dictated by abject terror, the terror he had resisted so long, but which had caught him at last. "In the dark!" I exclaimed, shaking with fear after my hysterical outburst, but still realizing our position better than he did. "Sheer madness! The river's in a flood, and we've only got a single paddle. Besides, we only go deeper into their country. There's nothing ahead for 50 miles but willows, willows, willows." He sat down again in a state of semi-collapse. The positions, by one of those kaleidoscopic changes nature loves, were suddenly reversed, and the control of our forces passed over into my hands. His mind at last had reached the point where it was beginning to weaken. "What on earth possessed you to do such a thing?" he whispered with the awe of genuine terror in his voice and face. I crossed round to his side of the fire. I took both his hands in mine, kneeling down beside him and looking straight into his frightened eyes. "We'll make one more blaze," I said firmly, "and then turn in for the night. At sunrise, we'll be off full speed for Cormorn. Now, pull yourself together a bit, and remember your own advice about not thinking fear." He said no more, and I saw that he would agree and obey. In some measure, too, it was a sort of relief to get up and make an excursion into the darkness for more wood. We kept close together, almost touching, groping among the bushes and along the bank, humming overhead. The humming overhead never ceased, but seemed to me to grow louder as we increased our distance from the fire. It was shivery work. We were grubbing away in the middle of a thickish clump of willows where some driftwood from a former flood had caught high among the branches, when my body was seized in a grip that made me half drop upon the sand. It was the Swede. He had fallen against me and was clutching me for support. I heard his breath coming and going in short gasps. "Look, by my soul," he whispered, and for the first time in my experience I knew what it was to hear tears of horror in a human voice. He was pointing to the fire some 50 feet away. I followed the direction of his finger, and I swear my heart missed a beat. There, in front of the dim glow, something was moving. I saw it through a veil that hung before my eyes like the gauze-dropped curtain used at the back of a theater, hazy a little. It was neither a human figure nor an animal. To me it gave the strange impression of being as large as several animals grouped together, like horses, 2 or 3, moving slowly. The Swede, too, got a similar result, though expressing it differently, for he thought it was shaped in size like a clump of willow bushes, rounded at the top and moving all over upon its surface, coiling upon itself like smoke. "I watched it settle downwards through the bushes," he sobbed at me. "Look, by God, it's coming this way. Oh, oh!" He gave a kind of whistling cry. "They've found us!" I gave one terrified glance, which just enabled me to see that the shadowy form was swinging towards us through the bushes, and then I collapsed backward with a crash into the branches. These failed, of course, to support my weight, so that with the Swede on top of me we fell in a struggling heap upon the sand. I really hardly knew what was happening. I was conscious only of a sort of enveloping sensation of icy fear that plucked the nerves out of their fleshy covering, twisted them this way and that, and replaced them quivering. My eyes were tightly shut. Something in my throat choked me. A feeling that my consciousness was expanding, extending out into space, swiftly gave way to another feeling that I was losing it altogether and about to die. An acute spasm of pain passed through me, and I was aware that the Swede had hold of me in such a way that he hurt me abominably. It was the way he caught me in the falling. But it was the pain, he declared afterwards, that saved me. It caused me to forget them and to think of something else at the very instant when they were about to find me. It concealed my mind from them at the very moment of discovery, yet just in time to evade their terrible seizing of me. He himself, he says, actually swooned at the same moment, and that was what saved him. I only know that at a later date, how long or short is impossible to say, I found myself scrambling up out of the slippery network of willow branches, and saw my companion standing in front of me, holding out a hand to assist me. I stared at him in a dazed way, rubbing the arm he had twisted for me. Nothing came to me to say somehow. I lost consciousness for a moment or two, I heard him say. That's what saved me. It made me stop thinking about them. You nearly broke my arm in two, I said, uttering my only connected thought at the moment. The numbness came over me. That's what saved you, he replied. Between us, we've managed to set them off on a false tack somewhere. The humming has ceased. It's gone, for the moment at any rate. A wave of hysterical laughter seized me again, and this time spread to my friend, too. Great healing gusts of shaking laughter that brought a tremendous sense of relief in their train. We made our way back to the fire and put the wood on so that it blazed at once. Then we saw that the tent had fallen over and lay in a tangled heap upon the ground. We picked it up, and during the process tripped more than once and caught our feet in sand. It's those sand funnels, exclaimed the Swede, and when the tent was up again, and the firelight lit up the ground for several yards about us, and look at the size of them! All round the tent and about the fireplace where we had seen the moving shadows, there were deep, funnel-shaped hollows in the sand, exactly similar to the ones we had already found over the island, only far bigger and deeper, beautifully formed, and wide enough in some instances to admit the whole of my foot and leg. Neither of us said a word. We both knew that sleep was the safest thing we could do, and to bed we went accordingly without further delay, having first thrown sand on the fire and taken the provision sack and the paddle inside the tent with us. The canoe, too, we propped in such a way at the end of the tent that our feet touched it, and the least motion would disturb and wake us. In case of emergency, too, we again went to bed in our clothes ready for a sudden start. Chapter 5. I appreciate you all being here. I truly, truly do. That's wonderful to know that currently 34 people have decided to come and hang out with me. So, I appreciate that. Hope we are all enjoying the latter half of this story that we started last week. I don't have I'm not sure what I've planned for next Wednesday, but this coming Sunday, we will be, for our Sunday night bedtime stories, we'll be reading The Mouse and the Motorcycle, as was greatly requested last Sunday. For anybody that's new, I am UndeadPapa, and I do this twice a week. On Sundays, we do Sunday Night Bedtime Stories, which is generally children's chapter books or young adult books. We've done The Wind in the Willows, The Phantom Toll Booth. We just finished, this last Sunday, we just finished A Wrinkle in Time. And I have some other great books lined up. We've got The Borrowers coming up, and we have Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim coming up. So really great lineup. Now, next, and the Wednesday lives, which are Storytime with UndeadPapa, these are more sci-fi, fantasy, horror type stories. They are decidedly less kid-friendly, but it's fun to do them either way. So I really appreciate if you follow. I send out notices before the lives that day to let you know that I'm going to be going live, and we'll go from there. And like I said, I appreciate you, every single one of you. I really do. So let us continue on and see what happens. Yes. Oh, and Wings That Work. I did see your note about your username, so I will be able to refer to you by name from now on. And thank you for coming back. And Tessa's here, yay! Oh, if you guys like spooky and semi-spicy audios, or spicy audios, you should go follow my dear friend, my new friend. We're new friends still. Tessa Vale Audio, really cool person, and her audios are great. You got to go listen to the most recent one. It spine chilling. It's so good, so good. Yes. Yeah. Wait. Am I stuck with you, or are you stuck with me? It's like I told you the other day. I'm like friendship glitter. Just when you think you've gotten rid of me, I show up in the couch cushions. All right. Enough shenanigans. All right. Chapter 5. It was my firm intention to lie awake all night and watch, but the exhaustion of nerves and body decreed otherwise, and sleep, after a while, came over me with a welcome blanket of oblivion. The fact that my companion also slept quickened its approach. At first, he fidgeted and constantly sat up, asking me if I heard this or heard that. He tossed about on his cork mattress and said the tent was moving and the river had risen over the point of the island. But each time I went out to look, I returned with the report that all was well. And finally he grew calmer and lay still. Then, at length, his breathing became regular, and I heard unmistakable sounds of snoring, the first and only time in my life when snoring has been a welcome and calming influence. This, I remember, was the last thought in my mind before dozing off. A difficulty in breathing woke me, and I found the blanket over my face, but something else besides the blanket was pressing upon me, and my first thought was that my companion had rolled off his mattress and onto my own, and in his sleep. I called to him and sat up, and at the same moment it came to me that the tent was surrounded. That sound of multitudinous soft pattering was again audible outside, filling the night with horror. I called again to him, louder than before. He did not answer, but I missed the sound of his snoring, and also noticed that the flap of the tent was down. This was the unpardonable sin. I crawled out into the darkness to hook it back securely, and it was then, for the first time, I realized positively the Swede was not there. He had gone. I dashed out in a mad run, seized by a dreadful agitation, and the moment I was out I plunged into a sort of torrent of humming that surrounded me completely and came out of every quarter of the heavens at once. It was the same familiar humming, gone mad. A swarm of great invisible bees might have been about me in the air. The sound seemed to thicken the very atmosphere, and I felt that my lungs worked with difficulty. But my friend was in danger, and I could not hesitate. The dawn was just about to break, and a faint, whitish light spread upwards over the clouds from a thin strip of clear horizon. No wind stirred. I could just make out the bushes and river beyond, and the pale sandy patches. In my excitement I ran frantically to and fro about the island, calling him by name, shouting at the top of my voice the first words that came into my head. But the willows smothered my voice, and the humming muffled it, so that the sound only traveled a few feet around me. I plunged among the bushes, tripping headlong, tumbling over roots, and scraping my face as I tore this way and that among the preventing branches. Then, quite unexpectedly, I came out upon the island's point and saw a dark figure outlined between the water and the sky. It was the Swede, and already he had 1 foot in the river. A moment more, and he would have taken the plunge. I threw myself upon him, flinging my arms about his waist and dragging him shorewards with all my strength. Of course, he struggled furiously, making a noise all the time, just like that cursed humming, and using the most outlandish phrases in his anger about going inside to them and taking the way of the water and the wind, and God only knows what more besides, that I tried in vain to recall afterwards, but which turned me sick with horror and amazement as I listened. But in the end I managed to get him into the comparative safety of the tent, and flung him breathless and cursing upon the mattress, where I held him until the fit had passed. I think the suddenness with which it all went, and he grew calm, coinciding as it did with the equally abrupt cessation of the humming and pattering outside. I think this was almost the strangest part of the whole business, perhaps, for he had just opened his eyes and turned his tired face up to me so that the dawn threw a pale light upon it through the doorway, and said, for all the world just like a frightened child, "My life, old man, it is my life I owe you. But it's all over now, anyhow. They've found a victim in our place." Then he dropped back upon his blankets and went to sleep literally under my eyes. He simply collapsed and began to snore again as healthily as though nothing had happened, and he had never tried to offer his own life as a sacrifice by drowning. And when the sunlight woke him 3 hours later, hours of ceaseless vigil for me, it became so clear to me that he remembered absolutely nothing of what he had attempted to do, that I deemed it wise to hold my peace and ask no dangerous questions. He went naturally and easily, as I have said. The sun was already high in the windless hot sky, and he at once got up and set about the preparation of the fire for breakfast. I followed him anxiously at bathing. He did not attempt to plunge in, merely dipping his head and making some remark about the extra coldness of the water. "The river is falling at last," he said, "and I'm glad of it." "The humming has stopped too," I said. He looked up at me quietly with his normal expression. Evidently he remembered everything except his own attempt at suicide. "Everything has stopped," he said, "because He hesitated, but I knew some reference to that remark he had made just before he fainted was in his mind, and I was determined to know it. Because they've found another victim," I said, forcing a little laugh. "Exactly," he answered, "exactly. I feel as positive of it as though I feel quite safe again, I mean," he finished. He began to look curiously about him. The sunlight lay in hot patches on the sand. There was no wind. The willows were motionless. He slowly rose to feet. "Come on," he said. "Come," he said. "I think if we look we shall find it." He started off on a run, and I followed him. He kept to the banks, poking with a stick among the sandy bays and caves and little backwaters, myself always close on his heels. "Ah!" he exclaimed presently. "Ah!" The tone of his voice somehow brought back to me a vivid sense of the horror of the last 24 hours, and I hurried up to join him. He was pointing with his stick at a large black object that lay half in the water and half on the sand. It appeared to be caught by some twisted willow roots so that the river could not sweep it away. A few hours before, the spot must have been under water. "See," he said quietly, "the victim that made our escape possible." And when I peered across his shoulder, I saw that his stick rested on the body of a man. He turned it over. It was the corpse of a peasant, and the face was hidden in the sand. Clearly the man had drowned, but a few hours before, and his body must have been swept down upon our island somewhere about the hour of the dawn, at the very time the fit had passed. "We must give it a decent burial, you know." "I suppose so," I replied. I shuddered a little in spite of myself, for there was something about the appearance of that poor drowned man that turned me cold. The Swede glanced up sharply at me, an undecipherable expression on his face, and began clambering down the bank. I followed him more leisurely. The current, I noticed, had torn away much of the clothing from the body, so that the neck and part of the chest lay bare. Halfway down the bank, my companion suddenly stopped and held up his hand in warning, but either my foot slipped, or I had gained too much momentum to bring myself quickly to a halt, for I bumped into him and sent him forward with a sort of leap to save himself. We tumbled together onto the hard sand so that our feet splashed into the water, and before anything could be done, we had collided a little heavily against the corpse. The Swede uttered a sharp cry, and I sprang back as if I had been shot. At the moment we touched the body, there rose from its surface a loud sound of humming, the sound of several hummings which passed with a vast commotion as if winged things in the air about us, and disappeared upwards into the sky, growing fainter and fainter till they finally ceased in the distance. It was exactly as though we had disturbed some living yet invisible creatures at work. My companion clutched me, and I think I clutched him, but before either of us had time properly to recover from the unexpected shock, we saw that a movement of the current was turning the corpse round so that it became released from the grip of the willow roots. A moment later it had turned completely over, the dead face uppermost staring at the sky. It lay on the edge of the main stream. In another moment it would be swept away. The Swede started to save it, shouting again something I did not catch about a proper burial, and then abruptly dropped upon his knees on the sand and covered his eyes with his hands. I was beside him in an instant. I saw what he had seen. For just as the body swung round to the current, the face and the exposed chest turned full towards us, and showed plainly how the skin and flesh were indented with small hollows, beautifully formed and exactly similar in shape and kind to the sand funnels that we had found all over their island. "They're Mark," I heard my companion mutter under his breath. "They're awful Mark." Oops. And when I turned my eyes again from his ghastly face to the river, the current had done its work, and the body had been swept away into midstream, and was already beyond our reach, and almost out of sight, turning over and over on the waves like an otter. The end. Oh, boy. That is one I wish I could do in one night. It was definitely crazy. It's definitely such a good story. Thank you, Songbird. So, we've got an hour left. So I was thinking, what else shall we read? Who's in the mood for a little Edgar Allan Poe? Anybody? Anybody? Thank you, Mr. Voice God. This is another one of my newest friends, Voice God. If you like that deep, resonant voice that is like butter, please go follow the man, listen to his videos. He's also a really cool guy, so please. Always in the mood for Poe. All right, so let's see what Poe I have. I actually did... You're welcome, sir. It's well deserved. Let's see. Oh. Well. Hold, please. A little... Alrighty then. So, how about one of my favorite Poe stories, The Mask of the Red Death. Let me just add it to my collection here, because somehow I didn't have it. So strange. Great minds think alike, sir. Great minds think alike. All right. It is one of my favorites. And actually, if you go back on my profile, I actually did an audiobook version of this that I posted on TikTok, and I posted on my YouTube. All right. Oh, there is something else I wanted to bring up while I have you all here. I am considering offering subscriptions. You know what? I actually don't have an image set for this one. I mean, I could probably get one real quick. Watch how I work. Mask of the Red Death. All right. So I'm considering offering subscriptions, and I'm not looking to get rich. I was going to do just the base subscription price of $2.99 a month, and really it's just about keeping the lights on. I will freely admit that part of it has to do with the fact that I am currently still unemployed. I've been unemployed since July, and my unemployment has run out. So I'm kind of in a tight squeeze. So Stray Cats, I do have a YouTube channel. It's just UndeadPapa, just like it is here on TikTok. I'm actually streaming there as well right now. So if you prefer, you can go over there. I was going to be introducing that in a video soon, but I wanted to let you guys know, if you want to, great. If you don't want to, that is totally fine too. These lives will never be behind a paywall. That's very important to me. If I did subscriber lives, they would be like maybe an hour live before I go live, so we can hang out, talk about the stories I'm going to do, the prep work, things like that. I might also, what I also might do is oh, the fat movie guy is in the house. Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir. Yet another one of my dear friends and mutuals. If you like somebody who is very enthusiastic about movies, he's a great guy. Go follow him. Fair warning, he's got a bit of a potty mouth, but it only comes out when he's really excited. So, but yeah, the subscriptions. One of the things I wanted to do is put out, say, hey, a list of books and say, what do you guys want to hear next? But really, it's not a cash grab. It's just something to help me out a little bit, to keep the lights on and keep me being able to do this, which is something that I love. And I love being here. I love sharing this with you guys, these stories, and the feedback that I get from you. All of the positive comments, they really keep me going. And I mean that sincerely. And I've gotten some really wonderful comments from people about how they feel about these lives. And like I said, these lives will never be behind a paywall. These stories, I believe, in telling the stories belongs to everybody. But there are some things that I can offer through the subscriptions that would be fun. So I will announce more in the coming days. And like I said, if you guys are interested, great. If you're not, that is totally fine too. I am just happy that you're here. Alrighty then. So now that we've got that out of the way, thank you, brother. I really appreciate you. I gotta you know what we could do? I'll DM you. I've got an idea. Might be fun. Be a little bit of a chance for me to flex my movie trailer voice. In a world. Thank you, Wins at Work. I really appreciate that. I really do. Alrighty. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. The Red Death had long devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar and its seal, the redness and horror of blood. There were sharp pains and sudden dizziness, and then profuse bleeding at the pores with dissolution. The scarlet stains upon the body, and especially upon the face of the victim, were the pest ban which shut him out from the aid and from the sympathy of his fellow men. And the whole seizure, progress and termination of the disease were the incidents of half an hour. But the Prince Prospero was happy and dauntless and sagacious. When his dominions were half depopulated, he summoned to his presence 1,000 hale and light-hearted friends from among the knights and dames of his court, and with these retired to the deep seclusion of his castellated abbeys. This was an extensive and magnificent structure, the creation of the prince's own eccentric yet august taste. A strong and lofty wall girded it in. This wall had gates of iron. The courtiers, having entered, brought furnaces and massy hammers and welded the bolts. They resolved to leave means neither of ingress or egress to the sudden impulses of desire or of frenzy from within. Oh, yes. All right. Hang on. Haha. Change the Thank you, Matthew. All right, so now we're just gonna update it over on YouTube as well. I want to leave them out. All right, cool. Got to change that graphic, man. The courtiers, having entered, brought furnaces and massy hammers and welded the bolts. They resolved to leave means neither of ingress nor egress to the sudden impulses of desire or of frenzy from within. The abbey was amply provisioned. With such precautions, the courtiers might bid defiance to contagion. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime, it was folly to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatori, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there was beauty, there was wine. All these and security were within. Without was the Red Death. It was towards the close of the 5th or 6th month of his seclusion, and while the pestilence raged most furiously abroad, that the Prince Prospero entertained his 1,000 friends at a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. It was a voluptuous scene, that masquerade. But first, let me tell you of the rooms in which it was held. These were 7, an imperial suite. In many palaces, however, such suites form a long and straight vista, while the folding doors slide back nearly to the walls on either hand, so that the view of the whole extent is scarcely impeded. Here the case was very different, as might have been expected from the Duke's love of the bizarre. The apartments were so irregularly disposed that the vision embraced but little more than one at a time. There was a sharp turn at every 20 or 30 yards, and at each turn a novel effect. To the right and left, in the middle of each wall, a tall, narrow Gothic window looked out upon a closed corridor which pursued the windings of the suite. These windows were of stained glass, whose color varied in accordance with the prevailing hue of the decorations of the chamber into which it opened. That at the eastern extremity was hung, for example, in blue, and vividly blue were its windows. The second chamber was purple in its ornaments and tapestries, and here the panes were purple. The third was green throughout, and so were the casements. The fourth was furnished in a light and lighted with orange. The fifth with white, the sixth with violet. The seventh apartment was closely shrouded in black velvet tapestries that hung all over the ceiling and down the walls, falling in heavy folds upon a carpet of the same material and hue. But in this chamber only, the color of the windows failed to correspond with the decorations. The panes here were scarlet, a deep blood color. Now in no one of the 7 apartments was there any lamp or candelabrum amid the profusion of golden ornaments that lay scattered to and fro or depended from the roof. There was no light of any kind emanating from lamp or candle within the suite of chambers, but in the corridors that followed the suite there stood opposite to each window a heavy tripod bearing a brazier of fire that projected its rays through the tinted glass and so glaringly illumined the room, and thus were produced a multitude of gaudy and fantastic appearances. But in the western or black chamber the effect of the firelight that streamed upon the dark hangings through the blood-tinted panes was ghastly in the extreme, and produced so wild a look upon the countenances of those who entered that there were few of the company bold enough to set foot within its precincts at all. It was in this apartment also that there stood against the western wall a gigantic clock of ebony. Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang, and when the minute hand made the circuit of the face, and the hour was to be stricken, there came from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound which was clear and loud and deep and exceedingly musical, but of so peculiar a note and emphasis at each lapse of an hour, the musicians of the orchestra were constrained to pause momentarily in their performance to hearken to the sound, and thus the waltzers perforce ceased wow. Okay, there we go. My brain was moving faster than my mouth. And thus the waltzers perforce ceased their evolutions, and there was a brief disconcert of the whole gay company. And while the chimes of the clock rang, it was observed that the giddiest grew pale, and the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows as if in confused reverie or meditation. But when the echoes had finally ceased, a light laughter at once pervaded the assembly. The musicians looked at each other and smiled as if their own nervousness and folly, and made whispering vows to each other that the next chiming of the clock should produce in them no similar emotion. And then, after the lapse of 60 minutes, which embrace 3,600 seconds of the time that flies, there came yet another chiming of the clock, and then with the same disconcert and tremulousness and meditation as before. But in spite of these things, it was a gay and magnificent revel. The tastes of the Duke were peculiar. He had a fine eye for colors and effects. He disregarded the decora of mere fashion. His plans were bold and fiery, and his conceptions glowed with barbaric luster. There were some who would have thought him mad. His followers felt that he was not. It was necessary to hear and see and touch him to be sure that he was not. He had directed in part the movable embellishments of the 7 chambers upon the occasion of this great fete, and it was his own guiding taste which had given character to the masqueraders. Be sure they were grotesque. There were much glare and glitter and piquancy and phantasm, much of what has been since seen in Hernani. There were arabesque figures with unsuited limbs and appointments. There were delirious fancies such as the madman fashions. There were much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, much of the bizarre, something of the terrible, and not a little of that which might have excited disgust. To and fro in the 7 chambers there stalked, in fact, a multitude of dreams, and these, the dreams, writhed in and about, taking hue from the rooms, and causing the wild music of the orchestra to seem as the echo of their steps. And anon, there strikes the ebony clock which stands in the hall of the velvet, and then, for a moment, all is still, and all is silent save the voice of the clock. The dreams are stiff frozen as they stand, but the echoes of the chime die away. They have endured but an instant, and a light, half-subdued laughter floats after them as they depart. And now again the music swells, and the dreams live, and writhe to and fro more merrily than ever, taking hue from the many-tinted windows through which stream the rays from the tripods. But to the chamber which lies most westwardly of the 7, there are now none of the maskers who venture, for the night is waning away, and there flows a ruddier light through the blood-colored panes, and the blackness of the sable drapery appalls, and to him whose foot falls upon the sable carpet, there comes from the near clock of ebony a muffled peal more solemnly emphatic than any which reaches their ears, who indulged in the mere remote gaieties of the other apartments. Oh, water break. But these other apartments were densely crowded, and in them beat feverishly the heart of life. And the revel went whirringly on, until at length there commenced the sounding of midnight upon the clock. And then the music ceased, as I have told, and the evolutions of the waltzers were quieted, and there was an uneasy cessation of all the things as before. But now there were 12 strokes to be sounded by the bell of the clock, and thus it happened, perhaps, that more thought crept with more of time into the meditations of the thoughtful among those who revelled. And thus, too, it happened, perhaps, that before the last echoes of the last chime had utterly sunk into silence, there were many individuals in the crowd who had found leisure to become aware of the presence of a masked figure, which had arrested the attention of no single individual before. And the rumor of this new presence having spread itself whisperingly round, there arose at length from the whole company a buzz, or murmur, expressive of disapprobation and surprise, then, finally, of terror, of horror, and of disgust. In an assembly of phantasms such as I have painted, it might well be supposed that no ordinary appearance could have excited such sensation. In truth, the masquerade license of the night was nearly unlimited. But the figure in question had out-Heroded Herod, and gone beyond the bounds of even the prince's indefinite decorum. There are chords in the hearts of the most reckless which cannot be touched without emotion. Even with the utterly lost, to whom life and death are equally jests, there are matters of which no jest can be made. The whole company, indeed, seemed now deeply to feel that in the costume and bearing of the stranger neither wit nor propriety existed. The figure was tall and gaunt, and shrouded from head to toe in the habiliments of the grave. The mask which concealed the visage was made so nearly to resemble the countenance of a stiffened corpse that the closest scrutiny must have had difficulty in detecting the cheat. And yet all this might have been endured, if not approved, by the mad revellers all around. But the mummer had gone so far as to assume the type of the Red Death. His vesture was dabbled in blood, and his broad brow, with all the features of his face, was besprinkled with the scarlet horror. When the eyes of the Prince Prospero fell upon this spectral image, which, with a slow and solemn movement, as if more fully to sustain its role, stalked to and fro among the waltzers, he was seen to be convulsed, in the first moment with a strong shudder either of terror or distaste, but in the next his brow reddened with rage. "Who dares?" he demanded hoarsely of the courtiers who stood near him. "Who dares insult us with this blasphemous mockery? Seize him and unmask him, that we may know whom we have to hang at sunrise from the battlements." It was in the eastern or blue chamber in which stood the Prince Prospero as he uttered these words. They rang throughout the 7 rooms loudly and clearly, for the prince was a bold and robust man, and the music had become hushed at the waving of his hand. It was in the blue room where stood the prince, with a group of pale courtiers by his side. At first, as he spoke, there was a slight rushing movement of this group in the direction of the intruder, who at the moment was also near at hand, and now with deliberate and stately step made closer approach to the speaker. But from a certain nameless awe with which the mad assumptions of the mummer had inspired the whole party, there were found none who put forth hand to seize him, so that unimpeded he passed within a yard of the prince's person, and while the vast assembly, as if with one impulse, shrank from the centers of the rooms to the walls, he made his way uninterruptedly, but with the same solemn and measured step which had distinguished him from the first, through the blue chamber to the purple, through the purple to the green, through the green to the orange, through this again to the white, and even thence to the violet, ere a decided movement had been made to arrest him. It was then, however, that the Prince Prospero, maddening with rage and the shame of his own momentary cowardice, rushed hurriedly through the 6 chambers, while no one followed him on account of a deadly terror that had seized upon all. He bore aloft a drawn dagger and had approached in rapid impetuosity to within 3 or 4 feet of the retreating figure, when the latter, having attained the extremity of the velvet apartment, turned suddenly and confronted his pursuer. There was a sharp cry, and the dagger dropped gleaming upon the sable carpet, upon which, instantly afterwards, fell prostrate in death the Prince Prospero. Then, Summoning the wild courage of despair, a throng of the revelers at once threw themselves into the black apartment, and seizing the mummer, whose tall figure stood erect and motionless within the shadow of the ebony clock, gasped in unutterable horror at finding the grave cerements and corpse-like mask which they handled with so violent a rudeness, untenanted by any tangible form. And now was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revelers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel, and died each in the despairing posture of his fall. And the life of the ebony clock went out with that of the last of the gay, and the flames of the tripods expired, and darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. I freaking love that one. Oh, but it is only 10:30. 10:30. All right. So, I really, really, really want to read The Raven. So that just got me into a Poe mood. So I am going to read The Raven, which I do so love. Well, if I ever decide to make merch, I'll let you guys know. $7.36. Oh, you're one of them West Coasters. I'll be over in the Californias. That's okay. You're in good company. The Fat Movie Guy is a West Coaster as well. Actually, I have several, like, by way of Newark, New Jersey. Oh wow, that's my mother was born in New Jersey. I don't know where though. Northern New Jersey, I believe. But yeah, it's actually, what's funny is that I've become friends with a lot of people here on TikTok, and honestly, like even my best friend is someone I met here on TikTok. Wonderful human being. I don't know if she's still in here though. Meg, you still around? She may not be. But I have so many friends. It's like they're all on the West Coast. They're like all on the West Coast. So I have some new additions that I have to make to my my RV tour when I finally am able to do it. Like get an RV and travel around the country. It is a very small. This is so much smaller than people think. You know, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like my grandparents lived in a small town in about out near Albany, in that area, and it is literally a town of like 2,000 people. There is one stoplight, St. Johnsville. And what's funny is that, like, I was talking to someone one day when I was in high school, was talking to somebody, and I mentioned the name of the town. All of a sudden, from like 20 feet away, I hear, wait, did you just say St. Johnsville? Dude I went to high school with, his grandparents also lived out there. Turns out my grandparents and his grandparents knew each other. Talk about wild, man. Oh, I would put East Coast food against any other food. Like, people like are shocked when I say I don't really care for New York City pizza, because I really shouldn't. I don't feel like I should have to fold my pizza in half in order to eat it. I much prefer the pizza here in Western New York. It's got some structural integrity to it, and it also tastes really good. We make really good pizza. And then, of course, there is the garbage plate, which if you have never had one or heard of one, I encourage you to look it up. It is a thing of glory. It's a Rochester original. Jersey pizza. We're going to have a pizza off, man. That's simple. We're going to have a pizza off. I've heard Connecticut pizza is really good too, and I'm just like, okay, the last thing I think of when I think of Connecticut is pizza. That, Wings at Work, that might be true. That might be true. Though what's really interesting, my youngest daughter lives in Liverpool in the UK with her mom and her stepdad, and like everybody there, their favorite food is not British food. Apparently British food is like, British people don't eat British food. It's really not very good. Like their favorite thing is like Indian and American food, and that's hilarious. Like they got all excited when a Popeyes opened up. You have family in Nottingham. That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. All right, so I am going to read us. It is whew. Absolutely, sir. Take care of yourself. We'll catch up. Thank you for stopping in. I appreciate you. All right, so this is going to be the last thing for tonight. I'm going to do The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. I have never read this live, so it should be interesting. See how badly I mess it up. The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door, "only this, and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you." Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word. "Lenore?" This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately maiden of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. Perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marvelled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore, for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, "Doubtless," said I, "what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore." But the raven, still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then, upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, with this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, "Nevermore." This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lighting with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer swung by seraphim, whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. "Wretch," I cried, "thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite, and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." "Prophet," said I, "thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me." Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word a sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul, from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor, shall be lifted nevermore. This is seriously my favorite poem of all time. Thank you for indulging me. I do so love that poem. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I saw that poem performed once live, and the guy was just amazing. And the emotion that he put into the reading, I've never heard before. So the next time I read it out loud, I tried to do that. And then since learning more about my voice and how to emote with it, I've tried to do it more. And I really like it. I really like it. Annabelle Lee. Well, I am going to call it, because my voice is, after doing that, my voice is a little raw. But I will keep that in mind for next Wednesday, or the next time I have, probably next Wednesday, and see when I have, if I've got a gap, I will happily. Annabelle Lee is a beautiful poem. It kicks me in the chest every time I read it. It's so beautiful. Edgar Allan Poe had such a tragic life. Some of it was his own doing, and other parts of it were just really awful circumstance. But I am going to say goodnight. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it, especially given the fact that on Sunday there was only 3 people. And usually there's sometimes close to 100. So I really appreciate that you all were here today. I say that a lot, but I truly mean it. The gratitude that I express for the people that come in here is genuine. I told somebody today, when I was growing up, I felt sort of in the background. And the fact that today I have almost 4,700 people that have decided they want to want to see my content. They want to come here and listen to me read stories. That means the world to me. And like I said, I do this every Wednesday and every Sunday. Sundays are my Sunday night bedtime stories. Those are more family friendly. To give you a little taste, we are going to be doing The Mouse and the Motorcycle this weekend, which will be really fun. After that, I have a couple other stories coming up. The Borrowers and Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. And then I will be having a special live where we're going to read the story The Tale of Despero, which if you've never seen the movie or read the book, it is about a mouse who falls in love with a princess. It's a wonderful story. I love it. And then Wednesdays are generally for my dark and spooky nights, but I also do some sci-fi and fantasy readings as well. So I appreciate you, Wings at Work. I really do. I really do. I really do. But I appreciate you being here. Thank you. We live in crazy times, and if this is able to give you a couple of hours of respite from all of the insanity, then I'm happy that we can do this. You did. I finished up The Willows by Algernon Blackwood, which if you've never read it, I highly suggest it. And then I did Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. And then obviously I just did The Raven. So, but I do this every Wednesday. So if you don't follow, please do. And please come back. Yeah, but you know what? Sometimes I repeat stories because I forget that I did them. So you might luck out. Anyway, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. And as I always say, please be kind to each other. It's more important than ever. And be kind to yourself, because kindness matters. And so do you. I'll see you soon.